Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I'm your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by this beautiful man, co-host Jim Nova of the Pittsburgh Symphony. Jim, how are you?
You meant me. Oh, okay. I was like, who else is joining us? I'm just a good old bubble butt. Remember?
That'd be funny if we had somebody else just drop in. You know, it's like, yeah, actually, Colin Williams is also joining us. So yeah,
actually, that'd be fun. Colin's an old friend. You know, Colin and I played in a quartet together when he was in high school.
I actually didn't know that, but Colin and I know each other dating back to middle school. So because we grew up in the Boston area. So yeah,
that's crazy.
There you have it. Yeah, he knows where some of the bodies are buried. So I always have to be nice to him. But luckily, he makes it easy to be nice to. So it's all good.
Right.
So
right.
Before I talk about today's guest, I wanted to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz artist model tuba mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So when we announced that season 2, as I'm calling it, season 1 was 200 episodes, a little long, but that season 2 is happening. One of the first people I was like, who do I want to have as a co-host? And Jim Nova, your name popped up right away. I just don't have that many friends. So I got,
I was going to say, did you exhaust your list?
No,
like, all right,
no, it's just a short list to begin with. There's not that many people that want to spend a Zoom call with me for an hour and a half. Except people promoting something. But you came up and then I was like, who would you want to interview? And you were immediately like, we need to talk to Pete. And that was your first thing was Pete Sullivan. And this was a pleasure. It was awesome.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And just so I'm sure it comes through in the interview how modest he is. You know,
yes.
He's just not a real, self-promoter. He's just kind of keeping his head down, doing his thing. But, when he picks up that horn and plays, it's just, he's got such command of what he's doing and what he wants to say with that instrument. And he's a dream principal in so many ways. I will say that sometimes he's not always the most organized, like he can be a little scattered sometimes. And that's sort of typified by, let's just say I figured out my role pretty quickly when I got here. Cause I remember we were rehearsing for a tour and the rep was, Mahler 5 and Chaik 5. So, Bill Caballero was a busy guy that tour.
I guess
every tour.
Sure.
Yeah. But, the hall was being renovated. They were like resurfacing the floor or something. And so the rehearsals leading up to the tour we had at the Opera Theater rehearsal space. And, when we're out of our normal space, they're going to move everything over there and stuff. And we sit down to play, we're rehearsing Mahler 5 and Pete, comes in, a few minutes before rehearsal, just kind of, oh man, I couldn't find parking, whatever. And he sits down and we get to the first spot that he needs a mute for. And the panic on his face, he's like, oh no. And he looks down and there's his mute sitting right next to his chair. And he looks over at me and I'm just kind of been waiting the whole time and just kind of grinning. And he looks at me and I said, yeah, there's more to playing second trombone than just tuning chords. And he was like, I love you, man. So that's sort of how our relationship works.
That's when you asked him if he needed the receipt for the dry cleaning or if you should just, leave it in his car.
Oh,
so
not quite that servitude. Yeah.
No,
but I will point out that his tux hasn't been cleaned in a while and that he might want to do it because he smells like a Turkish rodeo, Like, Pete, I think there's pigeons nesting in your coat pocket there, man. Like, I think it's time to get that thing cleaned.
So maybe you want to start doing his dry cleaning, but for your benefit, not in a servitude kind of way, just in like a, self-preservation kind of way. I can't remember the last time I laughed so hard that I made myself cough on this, but there you go. You're about to hear some really, really great stories. And as Jim just said, yeah, you can tell it's like a very, genuine, humility and just kind of deflection, which when that's put on, it's really off-putting, from anybody, right? When it's just kind of like, right. Oh no, I don't want to talk about that. When you're just like, when they're like, actually, let's talk about me some more. And he's real, he'd like to flex. And then he tells like these brilliant stories. You're about to hear some stories about like Dutoit in Montreal. Like I won't spoil it, but it's like psychological warfare that Pete was on the receiving end of. And and recording with that orchestra, moving to Pittsburgh, and then also playing in a hockey league after Pittsburgh Symphony concerts, like that go until like 1 a.m. Fascinating guy. And the bonus episode was really, really good. You can get access to that at patreon.com/the Brass Junkies, to access to not only his, but also a long list of other people. And Jim, you were great. You were awesome. I knew that you would be. It was great to,
thank you.
Cool hearing like, 2 trombone players, especially that you know each other so well, and getting to hear you talking about, talking some shop and, good stuff. So thank you for joining us, Jim.
He's, as they say, my brother from a different mother,
That's awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah. You could tell that there was definitely some love there, in both directions, which is awesome. It's pretty, it should happen all the time because, when you get to play in an orchestra or a brass quintet or whatever for a living, that's pretty special. It's like a real short list of people that get to experience that at any point in their lives. But there's a lot of sections that are not exactly like, voluntarily hanging out on Zoom calls on off days. And so when you're in one, that's good. So anyway. Let's get, without further ado, to the conversation that we had with principal trombone of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, Pete Sullivan. And today,
what's that?
We already stepped on it. And today on the Brass Junkies, it's twice.
You did it twice. Okay, quiet.
Wait.
Pete.
Okay, quiet. Just mute me.
I'm going to leave this in. And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by the principal trombone of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, Pete Sullivan. Pete, how are you?
Yo.
He just went Nixon on us. This is already off to a famous start. I gotta say that right before we came on, that Pete said, "This is my first day off in 2 months, and I'm spending it with Nova." And there was some love, but there was also
to spend it with Nova.
Those were not his words.
They're my words.
You can pay me. Yeah, we can edit that one. I'm not editing that out. So Pete, you were let's start right here because I think that this is fascinating. You were up late last night. What were you doing?
Well, I was doing what I normally do a couple of times a week, was playing hockey in the Mount Lebanon Ultra Senior League. So, and
Ultra Senior League.
It's called the USL Ultra Senior League, and 40 and over. And so we play a couple of games a week, and but we get the lousy times. They give the good times to the kids, and then to the high schools, and then to the senior league, and then we get the dregs. So we're playing at like 11. Some of our games start at 11:30.
Wait, that's when you guys should be in bed.
Last night, the old. Hey, Jim, you'll find out.
Of that.
You'll find out soon enough that the older you get, the less sleep you need. Okay.
Yeah.
So last night's game started at 10:15. So I was off the ice at about midnight. We got beers in the room and get home 12:30. I live literally a 3-minute walk from the rink. So, you get to bed around, you get home, you can't sleep. Get to bed about 2.
It should be the other way around, man. The Ultra Senior League should go first, so you get to the early bird special and then take the glucosamine and then go to bed,
Well, the other option is to play at 5 a.m. because there's a league that plays at 5 a.m.
Well, you're up by then. What do you know?
Anyway.
Remember what you said? Do you remember what you said to me on my 40th birthday? I'll never forget it because I say it to people now whenever they turn 40. You were like, "Happy birthday, Nernova. Welcome to the decade of unexplained joint pain." That's what he said.
For the record, I thought it was funny that you were in the Ultra Senior League until you shared the age and realized that I would have been in that for the last 7 years as well. So then I found it not quite as funny. So, So you will occasionally play hockey games after concerts. That's where do you get the energy to do that? I mean, I would assume that
He's
Jim is like
Canadian.
he's useless after concerts, and you go and play
Pretty
like
much.
forward in a hockey league. Like, where do you get the energy to do that?
Well, you realize that even if you're tired, I don't want to schlep over to the rink. I mean, 5 minutes into the game, you feel like $1 million, and, playing hockey is like, you spend an hour and a half not thinking about anything, just this chasing around this piece of rubber, and your mind is clear. It's something that I absolutely need to do. I tell my students too, not to get into that, but you got to be doing something like that.
Yeah.
You don't have to be running marathons, but you got to get out and shut everything down. And that's what hockey does for me. So,
That's great.
And it's good. I've made some very good friends over the years. I've been in the league I moved here 23 years ago. I've been in the league I took a couple of years off, but I've been in the league for, most of that time. I bought my house because it was 2 minutes from the rink. And there was a big maple tree in the front yard.
That's the most Canadian thing I've ever heard him say. He's like, I picked my house based on its proximity to a hockey rink. It's like, it doesn't get more Canadian than that,
I have young children. The schools are a disaster, but it's right next to the hockey rink. So like, sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like,
Yeah.
Oh,
that's really.
This is why I love doing the Brass Junkies, is because I know all about your trombone playing and about your resume, and we're going to talk about that. But like, that's really fascinating to hear that you've got. I think it's also important, like you said, for young musicians to know that you got to have a thing like that's outside of music, because even if you hit the lottery and you end up getting to do this for a living, which I don't mean to imply there's not a ton of work that goes in there, but there's certainly, there's a lot of being in the right place, at the right time, etc.
Sure.
You got to have something other than just the music, or maybe rephrase it. The people I know that just have the music tend to be a little high strung.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally true.
And also,
Totally.
also when you retire, not that I'm going to be playing a lot of, I don't know, we'll see. But, there's some guys retire and they're just always backstage, because they don't have anything else. All their friends are in the orchestra and
Right.
they did this for their whole lives, and then all of a sudden they got nothing,
Yeah.
So I don't want to, I mean, it's great to see some guys backstage, don't get me wrong. But I don't want to, I want to have other things to do when I pack it all in. Just probably sooner than later, Jimmy boy. Sorry to
no, don't say that. You're about to hire the last person in your section.
Right. I built this section.
We'll have the entire section will be people you hired after this upcoming audition. I mean, that's kind of,
that's cool.
I don't really know of any other brass section or any other trombone section that has been in that situation. All the long-standing ones.
Well,
Jay, Chicago, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah. But that doesn't count because he was hired by Moses, so it doesn't really matter.
That's true.
I mean,
we love Jay.
True,
we like Jay.
The guy's been in the job since long before I was born, before my parents were even together. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a legacy there.
I know, it's incredible.
Yeah. What year did he join?
69?
The 60s.
Wow.
60s, I think. Yeah.
Or 61.
No, it was early 60s because
Glenn
Dodson
still like
played
2
in
years
that
before
section.
Wow. 2 years before, after I was 2. And I remember I played with them, during the strike. I played a couple of weeks with them. And I'm sitting there beside Jay Friedman. And I remember as a kid, I didn't listen to a lot of classical music, but I remember hearing Symphony Fantastique, George Schulte and his classic recording. And I was just, what the hell is this? It was so cool. I didn't know it. I don't know what an excerpt was, but I thought this was just so cool. And it was him playing,
Yeah.
And so here, I went there and that's the piece that was on the program, was Fantastique. So I got to play Fantastique beside the same guy who was on that recording. So
that's so cool.
It's very
well. I mean, not to to bring it back to you, Pete. Like, I was a student at Curtis listening to Montreal Symphony recordings, drinking beer with my friends and going, man, that Miraculous Mandarin
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Who is that guy playing first? It's Pete Sullivan. Oh, wow, cool. And then fast forward, and then we played it. I remember we played it my second season. We played Miraculous Mandarin, and like the Navy band trombone section was in the audience. And I remember,
Oh, yeah.
you know, after the concert, they were like, they waited for us at the stage door, and they were like, "Oh my God, that was amazing. The Mandarin is dead, and you two killed him." Like that. You know, because it was just over the top. And, you know, so I had the same kind of feeling, you know, like, oh man, I remember listening to this guy.
Okay, Jim, I'm not that old. Come on.
Playing.
Come on. I'm that old.
We were closer than those two, but you know.
Well, to take the heat off of you, Pete, I've told this story a long time ago on the podcast, but it's a good one. Where I was down, this was 15 plus years ago now. I was down in Mexico playing a gig with Jens Lindemann and Fred Mills and Jim Thompson from, of course, formerly Montreal, and Marty Hackelman and trombone player Julio Briseño from Mexico. Anyway, we did the BAME Sextet. It was like one of the coolest weeks of my career. But there was this big fancy dinner that the mayor was there, and they asked us each to give like a speech. And it was getting translated. So you talk a little and then it was translated into Spanish. And I made this big deal about how cool it was to be playing a gig with Marty Hackelman because he's always been a hero of mine. And then they translate it. And then I said, because when I was a little kid and I'm looking at him, I'm stressing little. I was like, he was a poster up on my wall, and Marty's like shooting me this, like just death glare, like I'm gonna kill you Hitz. And then we had to wait while it was translated. And then when I saw his reaction, there was like blood in the water. So I then like riffed on how great it was and how young I was, and about how he was on a poster, and it was
to reel it in.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's the music business is pretty damn cool though, because we get to if you get lucky, you get to do that. Like you get to, sit next to Jay Friedman and like playing the music that lifted you out of your seat when you were a kid. Like, I don't think that happens when you're like an, aerospace engineer. There are people that inspire you, but they tend to just be like retired and gone by the time you come up, and you don't really do that like necessarily sitting next to each other, collaborating. And so it's pretty neat.
Well, I remember my audition here. I knew Pete and Murray from recordings and, their obvious, fame in the trombone world. And so, it was written all over my face, obviously, when I sat down to play in the section round, because I remember we played something and the fourth horn player saw me and he, like kind of a grin on my face. And he goes, Hey, you're not supposed to be having a good time here. This is an audition, And I was just like, I was having a ball, because I was just like, I found my tribe,
Speaking of auditions,
people.
Jim, let's talk about the audition that you lost to Pete for principal trombone.
That's right.
What are you talking about?
Well, yeah, it's true, actually. Well, actually, I mean, you came by later, but like when I was a student at Curtis, and the principal audition in Pittsburgh was open, and I just was like, I wanted to get my feet wet auditioning. So I just started taking auditions, and, I took the audition in Pittsburgh. I played like, five excerpts. And then I remember hearing Murray's voice go, "Thank you." Like that,
So that's like 98 or something, 97. It's probably 96,
Yeah.
97.
No, it was while I was at Curtis. So it was like one of the first ones. It was before they called you. Cause didn't they basically didn't they like headhunt you? Like, didn't they like, didn't Rian Kenny's the piccolo player in the PSO. And I think she called Pete and said, "You got to come take this audition. Morris Janssen's doctor and wants, and Pete was like, typical Pete, like, I have a job already. What? I'm all right. I'm good.
I live next to a hockey rink. What more do I need?
Yeah. I live in Montreal. I teach in McGill. Like, what's broken here, And but anyway, that's funny.
Yeah,
Never heard it quite put that way. The audition I lost to Pete. That's funny.
Yeah, at that point, they were just bringing people in once in a while. They had signed someone for a year or 2 years, so they were just taking their time. And then, so I went. They made it easy for me. They let me choose the date and stuff.
Do you remember what you played?
I started off. I played the entire Grondal with piano. They gave me a piano player. I played the whole Grondal because I just played it a couple of days ago with the Montreal Symphony on a afternoon concert.
That's a nice run through for your audition.
Yeah.
No kidding.
And then I remember I did that. And then I went and sat at the, first trombone seat, and I played name the excerpt, I had to play it. It was just like endless. Berg's three pieces, all that crazy shit. Stuff. Sorry. And then the section came up and we played, and so it was a long audition. And then, the way it works here, that they don't tell you right away. They wait a few days and kind of digest the thing. So I got a call a couple of days later, and I remember I was on the phone. My wife was beside me, and it was the personnel manager. He says, "Okay, well, we'd like to offer you the job." And I remember my reaction. I just went, "Oh, jeez, shit."
Whoops.
No,
This is amazing.
I'll put the phone down and I look at my wife, and I'm just like almost crying. Because, I didn't want to leave Montreal. But long story short, and then Janssens called me up because he had conducted Montreal's a few times, and he sort of talked me into to come. And I remember I've told this story. He's got this raspy voice, which is, I can kind of imitate that right now. But he says,
right now.
he said, we'd like you to come, but we have big plans for tours and recordings, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I remember what I said. I said, "Maestro, I'm honored, but, I like it here." And then I said, my wife is American, and she'd kind of like to, see what it's like, go back down south, And I remember he paused, and then he just said, "Peter, sometimes we think we are the boss, but we are not the boss."
Oh, man.
So
Yeah.
I ended up coming.
I love hearing Pittsburgh referred to as the South. That's great.
I know, right? I know. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wait a minute.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were not expecting to win, or just hadn't really gotten to that point mentally. Like, what am I going to do if I do? And then suddenly they're like, "No,
I
we
wasn't
want you."
thinking about it. It was the easiest audition I've ever done, because I was like, okay, well, I'll go down and play it.
Isn't that interesting?
Maybe hang out in Pittsburgh with Murray, which I did a couple of days afterwards, of course.
You remember any of those days?
So,
Our dearly departed colleague, Murray Crew,
And it shows you, if you care too much, if you want it too badly, it's not going to help. You almost have to be blasé about the whole thing. I mean, it's all in the preparation, for an audition. It's got to be the most important thing in the world. And then once you show up, it's just whatever. And the times I've been successful, I've had that sort of attitude. Say, "Oh, what the hell?
So
I get it. I get it. If I don't, I don't."
can I ask you, your first gig was Calgary? Is that correct?
Calgary, Phil.
Yeah. So how did you have that, like, if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't attitude for that first one? Because if I'm listening to this, I'm saying, it's easier if your fallback is going back to the Montreal Symphony, which is one of the great symphonies in the world. But like, what if, were you able to have that on your first successful audition?
Andrew, it was 1982. I have no idea how to answer. I don't know. No idea how to answer that question.
Yeah, there you go.
I was young. I was 22. I was
right.
What position were you? Assistant principal?
It was called second. I can't remember. Second associate, something like that. But it was second. I played second. I didn't play first. I didn't play a note at first. I was there for 2.5 years, and then I auditioned for Quebec City. That's a whole other story, which I won't get into. But I won the Quebec City job, and I was disqualified for some stupid reason, which I won't get into.
Too many men on the ice.
That kind of thing. Elbowing.
Oh, now I want to know what the reason is. What happened?
No, it was a political kind of deal. There was more of those shenanigans way back when.
Oh, I see.
But anyway, so then I auditioned for Toronto Symphony, and I won that. But Calgary wouldn't let me go for the September start. So I ended up starting in January of 85. So I got to play. The best thing about Toronto is I got to play beside the great Gord Sweeney, which nobody knows. Canadians, especially my generation. I mean, he was our hero. Gord Sweeney. He's a guy from Texas, like the coolest guy on the planet and the most beautiful trombone player. As laid back as you could imagine. I could tell some stories, but I won't. Just a
this is the
wonderful
time to tell
man.
those stories.
No, this guy was just, guys my age in Canada, he was like Joel, he's like, he was it. We all wanted to be Gord.
Wow.
And just the most beautiful sound production you could imagine. I still have that sound in my head. And soft playing, like, just unbelievable.
You got to tell that Mahler 3 story. You got to tell that Mahler 3 story of when he turned too many pages. Was that him?
Yeah, that's Gord. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to tell that story. Oh.
Well, I wasn't there. I heard the story. Murray tells us, he used to tell this story. He turned the page, he's playing the Mahler 3, and there's that page turn in the solo, in the first solo.
Yeah.
He turned the page and he turned 2 pages, and then he continued playing a solo in the style of Mahler. Yeah. That's the way Murray put it. That reminds me. That's right. That reminds me when we played with John Adams. I think you were there. I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
It was before I got
It was
there.
when I first started wearing glasses, and John Adams was conducting, and it was his Dr. Atomic or one of those,
Oh yeah, it was definitely before I joined. Yeah, because I would have remembered.
And there's this one big trombone solo where you have to stand up, and it depicts a sergeant, berating his soldiers, like screaming at his soldiers, right? So I have to get up, and it's just like da 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 da. It was hard. Da, 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 da. It was just like this kind of thing. And so this is when I just started wearing glasses. Okay, so first show, I go out and I forget my glasses. Oh. So I stand up, and I say, "Oh Jesus, this is going to be trouble," because I couldn't see the music at all. Right? I couldn't see it. I was like, "Geez, what am I going to do here?" It was right at the beginning of the piece. So I stood up and I played a solo in the style of John Adams.
Excellent.
With him on the box. That's great.
And so I after the tune go off, and he's waiting for me like this. He is.
Oh
pissed.
God.
He was so mad.
Oh no.
He's like, "What was that all about?" I'm like, "Dude, just hear me out on this."
Oh, and you got to tell that story about the 1812 and the injury that happened. That was pretty funny.
Yeah,
and how the fact that Murray co-opted it.
Go for it. These stories are gold. These stories are gold.
Great.
No, it doesn't make Murray live there.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't know. It's you gotta know. You have to know Murray to understand this story.
Well, tell us about Murray, who passed away not that long ago, right? Within the last couple of years.
Well,
it's been longer than
about 6 years now.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it was right. It was shortly after the strike.
Yeah,
because I remember him. I have a voice memo that I saved because I was on the committee during the strike, and I have a voice memo that he sent me right after we settled. It was like in November or something, and he was like, "Hey Jim, it's Murray. What's great about the settlement? You're probably out riding your motorcycle in the middle of winter." Like that was, like just the character. He's such a character, and
he's a good man. He's a good man.
Yeah. Yeah, he was great. He was great. And just the most, unique combination of like larger than life personality and incredible player, and just, he played in Utah long before I got there, and he left his mark on that orchestra as well. It's like people were still telling stories about him, decades after he was there.
Yeah. Well, Murph.
Was that part of the reason you came?
I know when we had done a couple of recitals together up in Canada when he was with the Toronto Symphony, and I was in Montreal. He came and played with us a couple of times. I knew him pretty well. He was a little tamer back then, little.
Yeah, a little.
But we played some nice recitals together. We played a recital with Gord Sweeney once, the three of us. So I knew Murray, and he called, but he wasn't like, "Oh, you ought to come, man. You ought to come." It's just, he's just, this is what we do down here. And I don't know. It's so long ago. It's just all a big blur.
Well, when you were talking about, you said you started as second in Montreal, right? So can you talk about like how you switched, from like how that transition worked and what that was like for you?
Yeah, I just put in a smaller mouthpiece. That's all.
Yeah, right. Right.
When it says one only, he just played those parts rather than laying out. Yeah. He also scooted to his right.
Again, Jim, you're asking me stories that happened like 25 years ago. I'd have to dig deep.
Yeah. Well, you got
too early in the morning to dig deep.
You got to
for the record, listener, it's 1:30 in the afternoon right now. I just want to be clear.
1:30 p.m. It's like, yeah. We're not on tour, Pete. We're not on tour, right? It's not,
Okay, so this is what happened. I auditioned for First when I was fairly young. I was 25. I was still in Calgary, so I was 24, something like that. And it was an international audition. You know the way they do it in Canada, they have national auditions and international. And for a job like Montreal, it usually goes to the international. But anyway, so I auditioned, and I just went to Montreal to see my old buddies. I didn't have any expectations. I mean, I worked hard, but so it was an international, and we went 4 rounds, and I was still alive. I mean, I remember he came up to me, yeah, you made it to the next. I said, really? And then again, and then there was a 3rd round. I said, you joking?
That's great.
And then there was a 4th round. It was just me and I don't know if he remembers, but Scott at Yale.
Scott Hartman?
Scott Hartman.
Yeah, it was just me and him.
2 of you? Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
And we were both like at the most 25, maybe 24. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
You're fine.
I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And he's only 25 years old. I don't think either one of us really knew what we were doing. But it was the last round. And so they listened to both of us and they decided not to pick anybody. But they found out subsequently that I was one of the guys, so I think that kind of stuck in their head. And then the next year, I auditioned for the 2nd job and I won that. Nice. So after going through a couple of principals, the Dutoit just, he made life tough for us in those first 4 years. I was ready to quit, frankly. But then after the second guy left, so that would be like 3.5 years into my stay as second. They, Dutoit brought me in and said, "You want to play first for a while?" Because you did well at that audition, blah, 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 blah. And I said, I remember what I said. I said, "I'll do it, but you got to be nice to me." I said exactly that. I said, "You got to be nice to me because, otherwise this isn't going to work."
Huh. Interesting. Imagine saying that now. Could you imagine doing that now? Like that could never happen now, So
I started playing first, and so we needed a second player, and I had gone to school with the great Vivian Lee, and she was in the Canadian Opera Company at the time, and I immediately said, "Well, we should bring Viv to play second, till we figure all this stuff out, whether I want to do it, whether you guys want me to do it." So I think after about, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so, they got the committee together and said, "Well, are we going to have an audition?" Or there was a clause in the contract that said, we can do this kind of thing. We could offer him the job. So they offered me the job and I took it. I guess again, it's a bit of a blur, but, and then after 6 months, they gave me tenure. So that's the way that happened. And then Viv had to audition for the gig, and I was very worried because by then we had done some of our, with William Tell and
that's a great recording.
The Hungarian March and bunch of nice recordings together, And so I really wanted Viv to win, Everybody did because she was so great. And so audition day came around. Of course, it's behind a screen, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And so what happened was that it was an absolute no-brainer. She walked in there and just There's just no question. You know, I kind of knew who it was because I know her playing very well. We studied with the same teachers growing up. We both studied in Ottawa with Doug Burden. And she just,
Wow.
I mean, I didn't even have to say a thing. Everybody's like, number 14, right? Yeah, number 14. And that was it.
I
So
mean,
that section played together for 10 years and we recorded a whole bunch of stuff. So,
I mean, you two both defied the odds, you know. I mean, the odds are always like the hardest thing to do is win a promotion in your own orchestra. And then the second hardest thing to do is to be a long-term sub who wins the job in the orchestra. I mean, those are the two hardest things to do.
Because the grass
and
is
you guys
always
both
greener.
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a expression, nul ne profite dans son pays, which means you're never a prophet in your own country. You know,
Your
in
own
your
city,
own,
yeah.
your own city, in your own tribe.
Yeah.
You never, you know.
I got to tell you, whenever Pete starts speaking French, I'm just assuming he's mad about something. When we're in a PSO rehearsal, if he starts speaking French, I'm like, oh, what I miss? Who's messing around right now? Pete's pissed about something, you know.
What year was approximately? What year was that audition with you and Scott Hartman? The one like before you won second, if
I'm
you
going
remember.
to say 84.
Wow. So that was
Something
that would have been right before he joined Empire. Boy, that would have changed history quite a bit if he had headed there instead of Empire. That's really interesting.
Yeah, 83, 84, something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like I said, I got the sense that neither one of us could really. I don't want to speak for hard luck. I mean, I said Scott. I mean, come on, guys, great.
Yes.
But I have a feeling that neither one of us really knew what the hell we were doing.
Right. That's funny.
I was relieved when honestly, I was relieved when they said they're not taking anybody. I was like, there's no way I could have done that gig. You know, you walk into a gig like that, first thing you do is maybe go on a European tour and then come back and record something, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
talk about high pressure. I actually want to hear more about those famous recordings with Dutoit. But first, we need to take a moment to talk about our sponsor, the Mary Papert School of Music at Wayne University. With Jim Nova is here. I told Jim to do the spot, and he was like, "No, you do it." So yeah,
I already paid the money.
If you go to the show notes for the this episode, which you can find either in your podcast app or at petalonemedia.com, then there is a link. And Jim, he actually put on a collared shirt even to make this like video where he talks for like a full, you know, it's like a minute and a half. He gives you the lowdown. It's like, looks like he maybe even combed his hair. It's like, it's impressive. But he,
Once whether I need to or not.
It's gradually taking you less time. So you're getting more efficient. That's all.
Well, there's less of it to comb.
That was the joke. Yeah. So the faculty there is incredible. Really, really impressive. James Gourlay, Mark Houghton, Micah Wilkinson. There's a long list of people there for all of the instruments, and so you should go and check it out. And Pittsburgh is a hell of a town. The people that like take shots at Pittsburgh are people who have not spent any time in Pittsburgh, in my experience, because it's like, I think it's a really, really hip town, and it's like a small city that has like everything you want in a big city in terms of like the culture. I mean that it's like it's a great place. Yep. Music, art, food, good coffee. I hate all of the sports teams, but that's, but I'm not the one going to school there. So that's not a problem for me. I don't hate the Pirates. I'm not old enough to hate the Pirates. Yeah. Wow. You gotta be like in your like 60s to hate the Pirates, because they haven't been good enough to hate for quite a while. But anyway, so go, check out the wonderful people that you can study with, or Jim. So, yeah.
Well, you got to tell the Dutoit story about Bolero. That's like
awesome. That's our segue back in. So, yeah, I've heard this tease, but I do not know this story, so I'm looking forward to it.
If you want to know why a principal trombone player gets paid more than anyone else in the section, it's stuff like this, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ask any principal trombonist. Yeah, pain in the ass. Let's just cut to the chase. But I when I first started playing so that transition period, we were at a rehearsal in the church and I was just doodling around and he was up there. He spent a lot of his breaks kind of looking at his score. And then all of a sudden he looks up at me, and it's in French, of course. Says, "Hey, my friend." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "How's your bolero?" Like, kind of aggressively, "How's your bolero?"
Oh, it sucks. I mean, what are you going to say to that? Like, what are you going to say to that?
Not my best excerpt, sir.
Because
not quite ready yet.
because the ball,
What?
see, the following season brochure had come out by then, and there was no bolero on it. It's my first year, and I was like, okay, no bolero, great. Okay, I may survive. And I said, I guess it's pretty good. And I played a few notes, just goofing around. And then he said, "It better be." He said this literally. He said, "It better be," because we're playing it in October. So this was like a side concert that was not in the brochure, right? So he says, it better be, because we're playing it in October. I said, "Oh, great." What's my merry way? But the worst thing is that was probably July. And every time he saw me, I just pretty well every time, walked by the hall, he'd say, "My friend, how's your bolero?"
Gee whiz.
I know. I remember we were at there was an audition in September or something, and he came in for the finals, and we're all sitting there. First thing he does, it was a clarinet audition. First thing he does, he comes and slaps me on the back and says, "So, my friend, how's your bolero?" In front of all my colleagues.
It's like psychological warfare.
I know. It was like, well, those are not pleasant months. But
so did you shove it up his ass in October?
Well, so showtime comes, and it's one of these deals. It's one rehearsal and the show. It's one of these fundraising things in the hall. It was, full audience and all that. It was solos with Sarah Chang just when she was starting out. And it had a bunch of there was 3 movements from the planets, and there was, there's just like a million notes. And then of course the bolero's at the end, right? It's always at the end. And so,
That's where it goes.
Yeah. And so we get to the end of the rehearsal, and he looks, I remember this. I don't remember everything, but I remember this. Looks at his watch, says, "Okay, we got enough time for the bolero," which the orchestra had played a million times, I mean, I've sat on second for the bolero a million times. Anyway, so he starts, and he puts his baton down, and he just starts, having a conversation with the concertmaster, just not even paying attention, and everybody plays their solos. And then as soon as just a couple of bars before the trombone solo, he picks up his baton, and he's looking at me like this, and
That's crazy. Just crazy.
And so I played the solo, and it was fine. I must say it wasn't perfect at the show, but it was fine. It was okay, but it wasn't, it wasn't my best show. But anyway, we get through the trombone solo, immediately puts his baton down and says, "Okay, we'll see everybody tonight."
My goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
It's terrible.
Like the
And then there was
hazing that involved, it's just
and
nuts.
then there was like 2 hours, and then there was the show,
Oh God, that's tiring.
And I got through it somehow. I don't know. And at the end of the show, he comes back to where the trombones hung out, and he grabs me. He says, basically, "Okay, we're good." And then he never bugged me for the next 10 years. Never bugged me at all.
Wow. So it's like you had to run the gauntlet successfully and come out the other side, and now we're buds.
And you know what? Sure enough, I mean, the next year we played it at Carnegie. We played it on almost every tour. We played it live TV in Japan. We played it live TV at the Puerto Rico Festival. I mean, he knew that I had to be able to play it under the gun, So that was his way.
Wow.
See how it's great? Isn't that great?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
all
Pete's actually
Dutoit.
43. Yeah.
You don't.
Well, I mean, as somebody who has sat next to Pete playing that solo countless times, and he's modest about this, but he's one of the great bolero players in the world. I mean, and the reason I think that is because he does something a little different with it every time. Every time something is a little nuanced in a different way. But the funniest thing he ever did one time, I guess, that there was this old recording of some trombone player puts in a bazillion extra glisses in
Well, that's
every movement. You know, that's
that's
like the
Ravel
original
conducting.
recording.
That's
Yeah.
this. Yeah. That's Ravel conducting.
And it's like all these extra glisses. And in the rehearsal, after that sort of came out, or I don't remember when that came to light or just became easily accessible, you know, the next time we played it, Pete played it like that in the rehearsal. And I never saw so many people like turn their heads like, what is going on
Is he
back there?
drunk?
Like, yeah, like what is happening back there? You know, and we're just like chuckling, you know, and he played it like that and just a rehearsal. And he was like, I just wanted to see what it felt like to play it like that, you know?
Because that was Ravel conducting, you know?
Yeah.
You can get it on YouTube, I think.
Yeah, it's really easy to find.
And, you know, whenever my kids are playing it, you know, doing the exact slurs that are in, I said, no, just go listen to the, you know, you don't have to go, ta, ta, da, ta, ta, da, 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 you know, just play the damn thing, you know, just sing the thing, you know. Ravel was fine with this guy throwing in all these extra glisses and shit. So, you know, anyway. Yeah, check it out. It's on YouTube.
I'm going to.
And then that leads me to the next thing, which is that at some point I'm gonna amass enough stories about Pete, and I'm gonna write a book called Pete's Cheats, and because he does all these little first trombone things that help him, like, and Bolero is one of them. He has this ritual with Bolero. Every time we play Bolero, about 3 or 4 solos before the trombone solo, he turns to me and looks me straight in the eye and seriously says, fucking hate this song. He says it every time. And then the solo before the trombone solo, he plays down the octave lightly and softly with it, and then goes up the octave at the very end, just really quietly. I mean, I've listened to the recordings. You can't hear it. He plays along with it. And then something different happens in the solo that he didn't think of the last time he played it or whatever. So he always plays it a little differently. I mean, we did it on tour once. So we played it like, you know, 8 times or something, and every time sounded different. It just had a different thing to it, you know? And so
that's really admirable.
Anyway,
that's really admirable, because that's, you know, I don't think anybody's going to fault you if you're just looking to, you know, for the safe call at the end, you know, just like, just not have anybody turn around or want to turn around to look and see what the hell's going on back there. But if you're changing it up, that's great.
Well, the first 100 times it was just survival, you know?
Yeah. It's like 100 times.
And so at a certain point, you know, like going up to the high D flat, it's always like, okay, a little bit on the careful side to make sure that everything came out okay.
Right.
And once I stopped doing that, it became easier. Just you know, Churchill, I think, said courage. Well, there's a famous Churchill quote about courage, and you know, it being I'm not going to put it right, but
it's like doing
the highest
what you need to do.
The highest of your qualities, and the understanding that without that, nothing else, you know, matters really.
Courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities, because it is the quality which guarantees all others.
Wise.
Nice.
It wasn't me. That was Churchill.
True.
Yeah.
True though. It's such a true statement, you know.
It is.
Like, I mean, when wasn't it like Teddy Roosevelt who said like courage is not being scared, but just being able to act in the face of that fear, you know, something
and you know, and frankly, you know, what are we doing? We're just playing notes. Nobody's going to die. I remember the first time I played I hate to talk about the Bolero game. The first time I played it was as a student when I was at Aspen, and it wasn't great, you know, at altitude and shit.
Oh man.
And I remember my dad's a small town surgeon, you know, and just before, like a half hour before, I had to call him because I was pretty nervous. And I just asked him, I didn't tell him what I was doing. I asked him, because I used to always ask him what he did that day, what operation he did. I would love when he explained to me all that. I cut this.
Wow.
I actually before I left for you. No. No, not that far. Not that far. That's too big of a cut. That's too big of a cut for next time.
Yeah.
What? Put the chainsaw down, son. Put the chainsaw down. No. He brought me in. He did a fairly major operation, and just before I left for college, and so he masked me up. I just kind of sat there and watched. I didn't even puke at one point, but
Wow.
But I called him up and I said, "So what'd you do today?" And he had to cut this guy's. He had to open up a guy's cheek because there was a tumor inside, and he was like, "It's kind of tricky because if I'm 1 centimeter too high or 1 centimeter too low, I'll hit a nerve and he'll be paralyzed for life, right?" And I'm like, "That's what he did today."
Perspective.
And he wasn't freaking out about it. And I'm going out there playing this stupid solo. Who cares? Anyway.
Wow.
Puts it in perspective.
So
But of course, when your job's on the line, it's your job.
Yeah, of course. The recordings that that you all did with Dutoit and Montreal Symphony are famous. I mean, they range from great to just like historically great, in my opinion. But it sounds like he was a little bit of an asshole. So what were those actual recording sessions like? Like, what was the vibe like? Was it really tense, or
Very intense? Very intense.
And,
well, didn't you tell me you guys would take the rep on tour first, and then you would like have a day off after the tour and record, which I think that's an incredible way to record because, after you've done it on tour, it's like, you can play it in your sleep, it's like,
let's just say that the tune was always ready to record. It had been worked on, it had been performed. Often it was already toured with, it was ready to go. So, and they were all separate. Now it's all live recordings. These were separate sessions at a church about 45 minutes outside Montreal, Saint Eustache. So yeah, they were pretty intense, but it's as stressful as you make it. You just, if you got your act together, and my section was so great. I never had to worry about my section. And I had Thompson there, who was, right on and the great John Zerbel playing horn. I mean, it was a finely tuned machine. That orchestra was a young orchestra, and Dutoit had chosen most of the players. And it was like a machine. I'm telling you, it was really something,
It comes through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
it was
those recordings are
discipline for sure.
Well, and we were, when I was in school, like the kid, those recordings came across our radar, because of the quality. We didn't know the Montreal Symphony. We were just like, somebody was like, "Oh, did you hear this latest William Tell?" And the Miraculous Mandarin one is the one that sticks out in my mind, just because it was like, what a complicated piece, and it just sounded effortless. It just sounded like the orchestra played it as if it were just a computer program. It was just it was so clean. I shouldn't say computer program because that makes it sound like it wasn't exciting. It was thrilling. It was like, as if you guys had done, your best takes and everything had all been put together. It's like, I don't know how did he encourage that kind of playing? Did Dutoit was he more about precision than excitement, or was
both?
It just what we talked about?
No, both. And like I said, it was young, everybody was just jazzed to be there, It was really fun years, really, really fun years. But like,
have you even heard those recordings?
He's Swiss, so everything has to line up just right, and then, then he just lets us go, he let us go. He was not the kind of conductor who did this. I mean, he'd give us shit often while playing loud. And, I could tell you stories, man. Ugh.
I want to hear them.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's sometimes he went over the line for sure, but we revolted at one point. He, in the middle of a rehearsal, he looked at the brass and he goes, "By the way, I was at the opera last night," because we used to do opera as well. He says, "By the way, I was at the opera last night and the brass section sounded terrible." And then he kept on conducting it. And we were looking at each other. First of all, half of the guys were subs, for the opera. And so at the break, we looked at each other You know, can't do that. And so we told the personnel manager, we're not playing. We're not playing the second part of the rehearsal
No
until
kidding.
until he apologizes.
Wow.
And so we kind of just, we met in a staircase, and Dutoit came into the staircase and he said, what's this bullshit? You know, I loved Charlie. I mean, I don't want to badmouth the guy, because look at what he accomplished, and he was really good to me. So I hesitate to be insulting or anything, because his intentions were always, I mean, this has got to be the best. It's got to be great. So he says, what is this bullshit? You know, and so we, a couple of us start barking at him. Different culture up there, eh? Like the French, it's more like, rah, 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 you know? So, and he said, this is bullshit. And he just went out, and so the second half of the rehearsal starts, and we went up there and we stood behind our chairs like this without our instruments.
Amazing.
We just stood behind our chairs.
Wow.
Can you imagine doing that now?
And he starts conducting. When a big brass section part would come, he'd just skip over it. He just basically worked the strings.
Incredible.
And then at the end of the rehearsal, he muttered something like, apparently I said something to the brass that as he was leaving, apparently I said something to the brass that I shouldn't have said, or something like that. That was his version of an apology.
Non-apology, apology.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, I mean, the closest thing to that we've ever done here was, I don't even remember the guy's name, but it was some guest conductor who came and did it was Tchaikovsky Fourth Symphony, I remember, and we, it wasn't that long ago. It was definitely before COVID, but it was like 6 years ago or something. And this guest conductor, he gets through the opening, and he like said something to one of the violin players or one of the viola players or something like it. Like, is it always like this? Meaning like how the brass are playing, right? And I guess some of the players shuffled, and nothing was said. It was just like this signal went through the brass section, and everybody played pianissimo for the rest of the rehearsals. Like, and Caballero and, everybody, it was like, nobody said anything. And I, like, as to like, okay, let's do this. And I remember thinking, I said it out loud. I was like, at one point I was like, man, we play like this, I could have like 100-year career,
Yeah.
And we didn't, we played like that. And then he kept asking, no, I want more, brass. I really want you guys, and we'd be like, oh, okay. All right, sure. Like we're just sotto voce the whole time. And then when we got to the concerts,
George was there, right?
No, it was after
Micah.
George.
Okay.
It was Micah. Yeah. And I remember in the first concert, Caballero came out and was like, all right, so tonight we'll go 70% tonight. Right. And then
I can't remember
concert
that.
and then the last concert, he's like, all right, 100% tonight for the last concert. And like the guest conductor was so like shocked and caught off guard that the word was that he walked off the stage and just kept going, just like left the building, like he just couldn't.
And we haven't seen him since, I imagine.
Yeah, I think not our finest moment, but but I mean, it was to the same kind of point of like, we're all colleagues here. We're all trying to do our best. We're trying to, I mean, I don't know about you people, when I'm teaching students about playing excerpts and stuff, I'm like, look, you play certain things a certain way in an audition, you play them differently in the orchestra. And when you're in the orchestra, my target audience is not the viola section. It's not, I'm not playing for their enjoyment. I'm playing so that the resultant sound out in the hall sounds the way it's supposed to sound, And I said, I know that's not fun for them always, but it's not that's not the point of what I'm here to do, so
yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
Well, I can more understand a conductor who's making comments and taking pot shots like at their own orchestra. I mean, it's still awful, right? But like when you're a guest conductor, that's just like strange to me. Like you're in somebody else's house, like, right?
Exactly.
And it's not like you're meeting on neutral turf either. It's like, hi, you're in Pittsburgh at Heinz Hall, like with the Pittsburgh Symphony. you're the guest here. Like, you're the one that should look and see, okay, everybody's got their shoes off in this house, so I'm going to take off my shoes. It seems like that's kind of how that should flow. Like, yeah, right. And I understand that it does a lot of the times, except for when it doesn't. But that's just wild to me when conductors just kind of come in like on the attack.
It's so rare, though. It's so rare.
It is really
in the old days. In the old days, and I don't want me to sound old, but in the old days, it was more common for the tyrannical conductors who just basically said and did whatever they wanted. It's just not that way anymore. That's just not the way the business is. And speaking of, I don't want to sound like like all these stories about Dutoit. He was hard on us, but I always knew that there was a reason for it, and that he sometimes went over the line with the words he used, but there was a reason for it, and he wanted that excellence, and it rubbed off on all of us. And the standard was just always had to be high.
The legacy of those recordings, those were
and I don't mean to be condescending to him or anything like that, because he helped me a lot to me. But anyway,
those recordings to me, they're like, it's like loose precision. I mean, like, where the precision is off the charts, but it also feels organic and feels like it's alive.
Mechanical.
Correct. Like the opposite of mechanical, which that's a hard combination to pull off, like even live, but let alone in a recording session, is to have it feel like it's being actually created and not just recreated for the 89th time. But also at that level of precision. And that's like, if you're young and you have not heard any of these, start with anything. I mean, it could be brass or not brass heavy. Just start with anything Montreal and Dutoit, and you're going to hear, there's just a sound. There's like an essence. There's a vibe to those recordings that are,
I just discovered one recently. Remember, Pete, when we were in the car driving to the Tyne factory and we were like talking about Shostakovich recordings, and you were like, oh yeah, and we found the Shostakovich 15 recording that you did with Dutoit, and it's just spectacular. We listened to the whole thing, which is spectacular. It's just incredible record. So it's not just
I hate
the French rapper and stuff
though. I just
yes.
Do you really?
Andrew?
I've never heard my mom. We recorded Model 3. I've never once listened to it.
Oh wow!
Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Just think about that for a second. Like,
that's pretty funny.
I remember we recorded it in my first season, and I remember he was like, he was picking my brain. It was the only time I've ever heard Pete talk about mouthpieces. He was like, oh, we got Mahler 3 at the end of the season, blah blah, and like, I want to try some different mouthpieces, and and then when we recorded it, I was like, oh man, it sounds amazing. Like, nobody is going to believe that sound came out of a Yamaha. Nobody.
But I'm not a Mahler 3 guy. I'm a Bolero guy. I grew up listening to to Herbie Green, J.D. Johnson, and that. I'm not one of these big American powerhouse kind of, or maybe not just American, but German or what. I'm not that kind of player. So I've never thought much of my like big middle register stuff.
Yeah, but I've listened to it and it sounds amazing. It's an incredible
all right. I'll take your word for it.
Incredible recording.
I'll take
it. He said he's not going to listen to it till he retires. I think that's hilarious.
That's funny. See, maybe you would be a Mahler 3 guy if Dutoit had spent 3 months saying your Mahler 3 had better be good instead of saying your Bolero better be good. Maybe then, maybe that's what you'd hang your hat on now instead.
Perhaps.
So we got like one segment left here, and I want to talk to you about what you just talked about with like jazz, because Jim was hipping me to the fact that you've got an interesting history with jazz, and that. But I really wanted to take a moment to mention not a sponsor, but there's a charity that I am lucky enough to serve on the board of directors of, which is called the Mockingbird Foundation. And the Mockingbird Foundation has been around for about 25 years now. And we have given out, we just passed the $2 million mark for grants to help access to music education all across the country. We are very special. I'm proud of the fact that we don't even own like a stapler. We are all volunteer, 100%. And we do, pay people to to do a little bit of work here or there, like freelance stuff. But there's no paid staff. We have no office space. Like, as high of a percentage as possible of all money that comes in goes directly to music programs, to help with repair budgets, to help buy new instruments, to take a guitar class that has 20 kids in it and they've only got 5 guitars and they each get to play a quarter of the time, to get them 20 guitars so that they can all play together, et cetera. And so if you would like to learn more about that, it is a 501c3, so all donations are tax deductible, and it's really it's an incredible organization, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. A very small part of it, but you can go to mbird.org, which that link will be in the show notes, if you would like to learn about all the things that we are able to do because of the generosity of so many people over the years. So mbird.org to learn more about the Mockingbird Foundation. So now, enough about helping kids who can't play instruments. Now I would want to talk about more important things.
That sounds like an incredible program.
It's great.
I'm going to check that out. There's nothing. Great. I always said, if everybody on this planet played an instrument,
yes,
everybody was in a choir or a municipal band, everybody, this world would be such a better place.
I just got goosebumps when you said that, because that's that's the whole mission. That's the, it's like I have worked my ass off to get where I am in the music business. There's a lot of privilege and a lot of luck baked into my story. Like, I grew up in a town that had a band program, that had a good band director, that had a tuba that I could use, that had a tuba I could take home to practice on. I mean, there's just and when the school tuba broke, then, the budget was tight, but there was money and resources to fix the tuba. It wasn't a question of, can this get fixed? It was how long is it going to take? Is it going to take a day, or is it going to take a week? And, it's there's just so many kids out there that don't live in a situation where there's just automatically a repair budget to be able to just fix the clarinet when it's broken, or to get enough reeds, or to whatever. And I can't imagine. I kind of hit the lottery with my upbringing, and my parents are still married now. I mean, but I can't imagine navigating my childhood without music. I mean, that's just that's what I hung my hat on every day of the week was as soon as 4th grade, as soon as I buzzed into that metal cup for the first time, it was this is my identity, and so and our goal at Mockingbird is not to turn people not to turn kids into the next Pete or Jim, but it's just to get them playing music and enjoying music and learning from it. And some will turn into people who join the Pittsburgh Symphony, and other people will just get a lifelong passion for music. But it's really important. So anyway, thank you for the kind words. So last thing I want to cover, because I did not know this until Jim ratted you out before we started here, is that that you can play jazz piano and sing, and that you've got and you were just reminded me, because you were just talking about J.J. Johnson. Talk to us about about your background with jazz. And Jim said anytime that there's anything that you've stood and played, sang in front of the Pittsburgh Symphony, that's fascinating. So talk to us about your jazz stuff.
I've never sung in front of the Pittsburgh Symphony.
Okay, sorry.
Let's make that clear.
But he's, anytime there's an improv thing, he just gets up and he does it, and people are like, "Well, wait a minute, what? How did that?"
Let's be very clear about this. I am not a jazz player. I am not a legitimate jazz player. I'm not. I have I have 2 brothers who are.
Right.
Okay, so I respect that way too much. I'm a closet jazz player. I consider myself a closet jazz player. I listen to probably more of that than I do classical music. I grew up listening to JJ and Curtis Fuller. Curtis Fuller was the first trombone. Well, no, James Pankow from Chicago. These are the sounds that I had in my head when I started playing trombone.
Amen.
And the guy from Lighthouse, which is a Canadian band, and especially Irby Green. I listen to him constantly. And so I think the way I play comes from that more so than, from whatever else, that's the root of my sound concept, if you will. But I'm not a jazz player because I'm not fluent in the language. I'm fluent. I can get by. I can get by, and I like doing it. And if it's a straight blues, no problem. If it's a standard from the real book, I should be fine. And I have too much respect for the work that my jazz friends put into it on a daily basis to ever say that.
Sure.
As a player. I'm a doodler. I'm a doodler. I usually play the right notes. But I mean, my brother runs the big, he's a professor at McGill Montreal. And he runs the big band in Montreal. And that, you got to have your shit together if you're going to play with Joe Sullivan Big Band. Because this is complicated, high-end, high-energy music. And I would be completely lost in that environment. So let's be clear about that. But I think,
So modest.
well, no, it's true. But my concept of sound comes from that, and I think, I love doing it. And now we have this a new Bob's conductor, Byron, and he's right out of the streets of New Orleans, and I've been able to get up and play with him a few times. And when Marvin Hamlish was here, I got to go up and do some duets with him. He'd be on piano, and we do some George Gershwin, and so I do enjoy doing that stuff. I think that, and I encourage my students at Cleveland and Pittsburgh to just listen, see what it does to your sound,
Absolutely.
So,
well, I mean, don't we have some stuff on our audition coming up that,
we do.
Well, we specifically put like some stuff on there,
like Cherokee.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah,
exactly. Your Bolero's great, kid. How's your Cherokee?
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah, that's really neat that you grew up listening to. It's cool that you grew up listening to all those people, and like Curtis Fuller was a huge influence on me as well. And it's interesting, it's like how Curtis Fuller plays and how Jay Friedman plays. There's like way more similarities there, I think, than differences. I mean, in terms of just like, in terms of phrasing, in terms of commitment to style, in terms of variety of articulations, and yeah, it's and once you recognize like all of that, you can listen to anything. I can listen to for tuba articulation. It's like I listen to John Paul Jones, like on Led Zeppelin 2. I mean, it's just like you hear how he's like got a real firm like left edge where it's like there are times when it's like leaning forward because it needs to be driving. It's like it's the exact same way that you steer a brass quintet from the bottom, whether you're playing like jazz stuff or whether you're playing like an Ewald. I mean, it's like it's all the same stuff. But when you figure that out, you're not only listening. You're not only learning from other brass quintet tuba players, which like that's a great place to start. Obviously, listening to Sam, listening to Chuck, and listening to John Fletcher and all those guys. But like, it's like Led Zeppelin and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and King Crimson, and like it's just like the list just goes on and on. So yeah, that's really neat that you've got that experience.
Well, yeah, like actually speaking of that, like Pete will, like, especially when he's playing bolero, he'll slip in a little slide vibrato and stuff that you would typically associate with a jazz kind of style. He'll slip that in even in some classical things, like if you warm up the sound or whatever. And I think that's really cool that he does that, and encourages us to do that too. So those worlds definitely collide,
That's great. Good stuff. These stories were gold, Pete. Like seriously, they were gold. Yeah, like you were all like, I don't know, I'm not the, this kind of thing isn't my wheelhouse, and like, and Jim was like, trust me, it's going to be gold, and it's been. I hate to tell Jim that he was right, because then he gets all like, yeah, see, I told you, but he was right. These are
I told you.
I am not gonna forget the bolero like Dutoit, like messing with you for like. I mean, that would have been a horrible story if he had done that for 2 days. I mean, just like, like 2 days and he'd done that 3 times. That would be like, share that on the podcast and my jaw would have been on the floor. But 3 months, that's just like
psychological warfare.
It's psychological warfare.
Though, when you're young, you can take that shit. Yeah. And he knew that. He was a bunch of kids in that orchestra. So
it's funny. I would think of the opposite. I would have been much more influenced by that as a younger player. Like now, if somebody did that to me, I'd be like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, I haven't got space in my brain for that right now. No way.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to have Pete hang out for the bonus episode, which will be released 1 week. I almost said month. That is not when it will be. 1 week after this goes live for our Patreon patrons. If you would like to learn more about how you can support the Brass Junkies with all of our ongoing expenses, plus hear bonus episodes with people like Pete and people like Jim and people like the list just goes on and on and on. Then please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn more about that and to join the many people who have already joined us there. And Pete, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for waking up so early to join us. I didn't know that you'd be playing hockey till 6 in the morning. So yeah, I didn't realize that. Like a 1 o'clock start time was like an aggressive ask. It's like I would have been a little bit more. Anyway. All right, and that is going to do it for this episode of the Brass Junkies.